Hi, everyone. This is Don again. I have Sanford Berg and Lois McNamara from the Kairos team, and they are here to tell you about their board. So, Lois, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind. I'm going to ask you what would you describe as the most important ministry component of Kairos?
I think we are you giving encouragement and support in different ways to people who are at life crises or significant times in life. They may be sick, recovering from something, maybe facing chemo. Some people can't get to church anymore, and there are all kinds of things that come up. So we support them in different ways, quite a few different ways.
Okay. And Sanford, to you, what does service look like on Kairos?
Well, it's, I think, the most flexible way a person can participate in the nurture and showing compassion within the church. I mean, everyone has different schedules, but this particular group is large enough, and Lois is such an outstanding coordinator that it's not a burdensome task at all. So I see the service as both providing support in times of when people are down and have tragedies, but also the celebratory times when we might send cards to graduating high school seniors and all. And to me, it's a way of supporting the community and creating an atmosphere that we're in this together and we support one another. And this just happens to be a more organized way that the church has structured itself to ensure that no one falls through the cracks.
Right.
I know I've been touched by Kairos myself. We received a beautiful gift basket when our kids were born. And also when my dad lately has been in and out of the hospital, and I really appreciate all the cards that folks sent from church, and particularly at the coordination of Kairos, getting those that messages to me. So definitely appreciated that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Lois, what have you found to be the most rewarding or the biggest personal benefit from your time as serving on Kairos?
To me, the most rewarding times are when I visit someone. And I think about the meaning of Kairos. Kairos is the opposite of Chronos, which is vertical time, and Kairos is almost like horizontal time, that time when things sort of stop, time sort of stops. You really make a connection with people. And that's happened a couple of times for me when I took a meal to somebody and then stayed to visit with them and hear about their situation.
Yeah.
Now, Larry Rummer used to call it God's time, going straight up. I'm not as spiritual as Larry, so, but those are really special times for me. And as coordinator, I've been more in the administrative end, asking people to do this or this person to do that person to do that, and keeping track of records. And so I'm hoping that someday I can go back to just being an ordinary Kairos member and somebody else can do the coordination.
Big shoes to fill for sure. And Sanford, what would you describe as a meaningful experience from your time on this board?
Well, during this COVID time, one thing that I've been doing is just making phone calls to people, mainly who I know, but some who I do not, and just checking in with them as a way of, given that we're not seeing each other on Sunday morning physically, how do we check in and make sure that things are going well for people? And that's been very satisfying. I love listening to people's stories and finding out what they're doing and what they're finding meaningful and what new ways they have found that have been sort of surprises in this time apart. And so that has been a very, very special activity. When I said this is a group where flexibility matters, I just would underscore that people may go a month or two without really contributing in any official way, and then find themselves in a position of being able to drive someone somewhere or write a couple of cards, and that's very satisfying. It's a way of really staying connected to people that I really care deeply about.
That's wonderful. Lois, when does Kairos typically meet in an organized fashion? And also, are there any particular types of folks that you're looking to recruit for Kairos?
Okay, well, first of all, we only meet sporadically,
Yes.
maybe 2, possibly 3 times a year, because we're not that kind of a committee that works together on things generally, that we work together on some projects. So for the most part, even though we're a large committee, we are the older women in the congregation. The people who are retired, and I was happy to retire a little bit early and be able to volunteer. But especially in a time like this, we could use greater diversity. For instance, one of the things I was called on to arrange for recently, about a month ago, was somebody needed a couple of rides for post-cancer treatment checkups. And I don't feel comfortable driving somebody in my car at this point, that, somebody who's not in my COVID pod. And I didn't want to ask other older people to do that. So I called on somebody who was probably in her early 30s or late 20s and was out in the working world. She said, sure, I'll be happy to. And she did. She drove him to these 2 appointments and waited with him. And it worked out fine. So we really could use more younger people. Another situation was when Judy Broward was facing what she probably knew was her last Christmas. And Chuck called, emailed me and said, could we get somebody to get the Christmas decorations out of the attic? And, by afternoon it was done. A woman who was probably middle-aged and her teenage daughter went over and did it, and they were thin and they were younger and limberer, and we could really use more diversity on our committee.
Yeah.
Very good.
I would second that. I mean, when Lois said we don't meet often, it really is a very light touch, and what those meetings might mainly involve are to help us be better listeners, to help us know what to say in situations that might be challenging, and it's very much it's almost like sharing stories of how members of the group have been compassionate towards others, and that's and we learn from one another that way. So it's not as though someone is lecturing us on this, but it's really a deep sharing. But when I stepped into the room and found there was only one other male there, I was really upset. I was frustrated with the men of this congregation, and I just think we can do better. We've got to also show up and be there to support one another. And so I've been prodding the men's lunch group. I've been talking to people, but we really need some volunteers to kind of show up. And if you don't have any other role in the church, then for sure this is the kind of place where having your name on the list and being possibly available, it really makes a difference. And just being sensitive and aware to that. And if you have other roles in the church, I'm on the board of business, but it's not as though this is a big burden. It's something that we do for one another. So again, just being part of that pretty large team. I mean, it's about 30, 40 people. And it's a good way to, I think, stay connected within the group and to have a real impact on how we move forward together in difficult times or in celebratory times.
Great answer. Thank you. So I'm going to ask one last question. I'll ask the same question of both of you. I'll start with Lois. So Lois, how does your service on Kairos inspire you, connect you with others, and or nurture you spiritually?
I feel nurtured when I can help somebody else. And I am not as traditionally religious, but I want to be part of a community of people that works for the betterment of society. And UCG has so many things that are outward looking, but this is taking care of our own. And I've just met so many special people, just getting to know them, it is inspiring when I know how many special people there are as part of the congregation, and I can learn from them in interacting with them too.
Yeah.
I don't know if you call that spiritual, but it's inspiring to me.
It is.
Sanford, same question for you.
Yeah, I've been thinking about how we help one another, and I think it's easier to give help than to accept help. And I think being part of this group has underscored for me and almost enabled me to, when the times come, and they will come, I will be ready and able to seek assistance and seek help. And I know the same for my beloved, that if we see this in action, then we realize it's for us as well. And that's not a selfish motive. It's just a realization that asking for help can be hard. And it's so important for the ministers to be aware of needs or emerging issues. It's important so that they can let Lois know that someone is needing some assistance. So we just have to be able to speak up. And I think just seeing this, the big picture that Kairos does present, just underscores that for me as a life lesson of both giving and receiving are part of our spiritual journey.
Right.
And if there is time, I might add that sometimes we, as ordinary members of the congregation, see needs that the ministers aren't yet aware of. This summer, there was somebody who another person we alerted to. She was just home from the hospital with an emergency appendectomy and probably could use some meals. So I arranged that with Shauna. And when I went over to, a lot of times sometimes I end up taking the first meal because people don't know about it very long in advance. And I and somebody else who had alerted me to it could see that there was probably financial need too. And there is a fund at the church to take care of that. So we don't do everything. We don't walk dogs. We don't mow lawns for people. That's considered, we decide that's out of our mission statement. But going to the Bible, there's that story in the Bible about Mary and Martha. We're the Marthas. We don't just sit there and meditate. I'm sorry. We try to do something. We're the Marthas.
Well, those are great answers, and thank you both so much for sharing this time together. All right.